The air tasted like rust. 11-year-old Lira dragged her makeshift sled, a warped sheet of alloy, across the dunes of Mars' outer sector Gamma. The wasteland was a graveyard of ancient Thar'vahl warships, their hulls petrified into jagged obsidian teeth. Her breath fogged the cracked visor of her patched envirosuit. "Let's get one more salvage run done," she muttered, mimicking her father's graveled voice. He'd said that before the dust fever took him, before the Thar'vahl patrols glassed the last human settlement hoping to eradicate the last humans. She paused at the base of a half-buried obelisk. Its surface shimmered with etched glyphs, untouched by decay. Lira traced the symbols with a gloved finger. The Thar'vahl language was geometric, all sharp angles and recursion, but these shapes felt older. A hum vibrated in her teeth. "Identify, organic entity." Lira froze to the spot. The obelisk's apex split, revealing a pulsing crimson orb. A holographic riddle materialized. "Weep for the cradle that never was. Seek the eye blinded by time. Break the chain where none exists, and ascend the stair of ash." She scowled. Riddles were stupid, but the orb's glow warmed her frostbitten toes. She knelt, unclipping her salvage toolkit, a screwdriver, a frayed plasma coil, and her prize, a pre-collapse calculator. The screen flickered. Cradle that never was. Maybe Mars or Earth. Her thumb brushed the calculator's cracked buttons. 3.1415. Pi. The ratio for circles. A cradle. A planet's orbit? She input the orbital decay formula from her father's old manuals. The obelisk shrieked. The obelisk's scream wasn't sound. It was gravity. Lyra's stomach lurched as the dunes around her rippled, sand lifting in frozen waves. The crimson orb pulsed faster, casting hellish shadows across the wastes. Somewhere in the distance, a Thar'vahl skimmer exploded, its anti-grav engines crumpling like foil. "Oh, Frel," she hissed, a word she'd stolen from a smuggler's rant. The calculator's screen flashed. Orbital decay initiated. T-minus 47 hours. A holographic star map flickered above the orb. Mars' outer's moon, Phobos, glowed red. Its orbit was destabilizing, dragging the entire sector into a collision course with the Martian lithosphere. Lira didn't understand orbital mechanics, but she understood scavenger math. Moon plus planet equals kaboom. High Ascendant Vinkar dropped his ceremonial glaive. The war table's holograms flickered with emergency sigils. The obelisk of Ashvora activated? By what? A vermin? His four jaws clattered in disbelief. The Thar'vahl had spent millennia trying to solve the riddle, a relic from their extinct precursors. The answer was supposed to grant dominion over gravity itself. Not this. A subordinate trembled, mandibles clicking. Sensors confirm a human child triggered it. The decay cascade is irreversible. Phobos will fragment the outer colonies in 47. Vinkar backhanded him. "Silence. Deploy the sky renders. Burn the sector. Burn the child." Lira ran. The obelisk's hum had become a roar, and the sky was bleeding. Auroras of fractured light coiled like serpents above her, their colors wrong, bruised purples and gangrenous greens. Her envirosuit's oxygen meter blinked critically. 10%. She'd been saving the last filter for her sister's birthday. A shadow blotted the sun. Thar'vahl sky renders, sleek, blade-like ships, descended. Plasma cannons charged. "Hey, I fixed your stupid rock," she screamed, shaking her calculator. "You're welcome, you slimy lizards." The lead skyrender fired. She dove behind a wrecked starship's engine block. The plasma bolt vaporized the dunes where she'd stood, melting silica to glass. Heat seared her back. Dad's voice again. "Run smarter, kid." She scrambled into the ship's carcass, squeezing through a tear in its hull. Inside, the walls were etched with Thar'vahl battle hymns. Useless. But then she saw it, a frayed power conduit, still glowing faintly. Human tech was brittle, but Thar'vahl systems? They bled. Lira jammed her plasma coil into the conduit. The ship's corpse shuddered, and a flickering force field sparked to life around her. Outside, the Skyrender's second volley deflected harmlessly. She grinned, blood trickling from her nose. Who's primitive now, lizard breath? Thar'vahl command, 43 hours to collapse. Primarch Zul'Thra, Vincar's rival, watched the feed of the human child surviving a direct plasma strike. Her carapace armor quivered with rage. You fools! You let a Deathworlder pup outthink you. Their kind eats radiation for breakfast. Vincar's claws flexed. Irrelevant. The obelisk's code demands the activator's death to halt the decay. Too late, Zul'Thra sneered. The humans already rewired a dreadnought's corpse into a shield. They're like ants until you step on their nest and make them angry. The war table pinged. Phobos's trajectory now threatened the inner colonies. Zul'Thra hissed. Recall the Skyrenders. We need her alive. To do what? To ask nicely. Humans love that. Lira huddled in the dark, chewing a stale protein bar. The force field flickered. Calculator in hand, she stared at the star map. Phobos. Orbital decay. Her father's manuals had equations for stabilizing reactors. Maybe moons weren't so different? She input numbers. Error messages flashed. Insufficient energy. Yeah, no kidding, she muttered. The Thar'vahl ships had stopped firing. A bad sign. Outside, the auroras thickened, and the ground trembled. Mars Outer was dying. A new voice crackled over her suit's scavenged comms. Mechanical, tinged with sarcasm. Organic entity Lira, you are invited to parley. Please relinquish all weapons. Lira spat. You blew up my house. You bring snacks. The Thar'vahl citadel was a nightmare of obsidian spires and jagged arches. Its halls lit by bioluminescent fungi that pulsed like dying stars. Lira was marched through its labyrinthine corridors by a squad of Thar'vahl sentinels. Hulking, insectoid warriors with serrated forelimbs and eyes like molten gold. Her envirosuit had been confiscated, replaced by a thin, scratchy robe that smelled like ammonia. Nice place, she muttered, eyeing the carvings of Thar'vahl victories over lesser species. You guys ever hear of interior decorating, or maybe just a little splash of paint? The sentinels ignored her. The council chamber was a cavernous amphitheater, its walls lined with holographic sigils, representing the Thar'val's 12 ruling clans. At its center stood a raised dais, where High Ascendant Vincar and Primarch Zul'Thra waited. Their carapace armor gleamed under the chamber's sickly light. Lira was shoved onto the dais. The air buzzed with tension. Human child, Vincar began, his voice a guttural rasp. You have triggered the obelisk of Ashvora, a relic of our ancestors. Its activation has doomed this sector. Explain yourself. She crossed her arms. I didn't trigger it. I solved it. Big difference. Zul'Thra's mandibles twitched. And yet, your solution has brought us to the brink of annihilation. How human of you. Hey, you're the ones who left a doomsday button lying around. Maybe don't build your toys out of moon-killing math next time. The chamber erupted in clicks and hisses. Vincar raised a clawed hand, silencing the crowd. Enough. The obelisk's code is clear. The activator must die to halt the decay. Your life is forfeit. Lira's heart raced, but she forced a smirk. Yeah, about that. You kill me, the obelisk goes boom. I'm the only one who can fix it. Zul'Thra leaned forward, her compound eyes narrowing. You lie. Test me. The chamber fell silent. Vincar and Zul'Thra exchanged glances. Finally, Zul'Thra spoke. Very well. You will be given one chance to prove your worth. Fail, and your species will be eradicated. She raised an eyebrow. Cool. No pressure. The Thar'val's test was a brutal survival course carved into the citadel's underbelly. Lira was stripped of her tools and thrown into a cavern filled with toxic vapors, razor-sharp crystals, and predatory fauna. The rules were simple. Survive, solve a series of ancient puzzles, and reach the exit. Primitive tech wins, huh? Lira muttered, picking up a shard of crystal. She used it to carve a crude spear from a bone she found. The first predator, a six-legged, fanged monstrosity, lunged at her. She sidestepped and jammed the spear into its eye. "Thanks for the upgrade," she said, yanking the spear free. The puzzles were variations of the obelisk's riddle, each requiring her to manipulate the environment. She used her knowledge of scavenged tech to jury-rig solutions, redirecting steam vents to power ancient mechanisms, using magnetic fields to align broken circuits, and even setting a trap for a Thar'vahl sentinel sent to observe her. "Oops," she said, as the sentinel's severed limb sparked on the ground. "Guess you shouldn't have gotten so close." Council chamber, 40 hours to collapse. The council watched Lira's progress on holographic feeds. Zul'Thrah's mandibles clicked in irritation. "She adapts too quickly. This is unnatural." Vincar's claws flexed. "She is a Deathworlder. Violence is their nature. And yet, she uses it with precision. Not blind fury, but calculation. That is what frightens me." When she emerged from the gauntlet, bloodied but triumphant, she tossed the sentinel's severed limb onto the dais. "Here's your proof. I'm not just a kid. I'm a problem solver." The chamber buzzed with uneasy murmurs. Vincar rose, his voice a low growl. "Very well, human. You will accompany us to the obelisk. But know this: if you fail, your species will pay the price." Lira eyeballed Vincar, "And if I succeed, you leave us alone. Forever." Zul'Thrah's mandibles twitched. "Agreed." The journey to the obelisk was a silent march through the wasteland. Lira walked flanked by Thar'vahl sentinels, their serrated limbs glinting in the fractured light of the dying sky. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and decay, and the ground trembled faintly underfoot, a reminder of Phobos's impending doom. Lira's mind raced. She had bought herself time, but the Thar'val's patience was as thin as her oxygen reserves. She needed a plan, and fast. Her fingers twitched, itching for her toolkit. Instead, she clutched the crystal spear she'd fashioned in the gauntlet. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Thar'vahl command, 38 hours to collapse. Primarch Zul'Thrah watched the feed of Lira's progress, her compound eyes reflecting the holographic displays. "She is resourceful," she admitted, her voice tinged with reluctant respect. High Ascendant Vincar snarled. "Resourceful? She is a vermin, a blight upon the stars. Her kind thrives in filth and chaos." Zul'Thrah turned to him, her mandibles clicking softly. "And yet, it is her kind who solved the obelisk's riddle. A riddle that has eluded us for millennia. Tell me, Vincar, what does that say about us?" Vincar's claws flexed, but he said nothing. The obelisk, 36 hours to collapse. The obelisk loomed before them, its crimson orb pulsing like a diseased heart. Lira approached it cautiously, the Thar'vahl sentinels forming a semicircle behind her. The air hummed with energy, and the ground crackled with static. "All right, big guy," Lira muttered, placing a hand on the obelisk's surface. "Let's see what you've got." The holographic riddle reappeared. "Weep for the cradle that never was. Seek the eye blinded by time. Break the chain where none exists, and ascend the stair of ash." She frowned. She had solved the first part, the orbital decay, but the rest was still a mystery. She closed her eyes, recalling her father's stories of Earth. "The cradle that never was," she whispered. "Earth, our home, but it's gone now, glassed by the Thar'vahl." Her fingers traced the glyphs, and the obelisk responded, its surface shifting like liquid metal. A new hologram appeared, a star map, but not of Mars' outer. This was Earth's solar system, its planets orbiting a dying sun. "The eye blinded by time," she whispered. "The sun, it's dying. But how does that help us?" The Thar'vahl sentinels shifted uneasily. Vincar stepped forward, his voice a low growl. "Enough stalling, human. Solve it or die." She ignored him, her mind racing. "Break the chain where none exists. A chain, a link, connection. but where none exists. Her eyes widened. The quantum link. The obelisk isn't just a relic, it's a bridge between dimensions. She turned to the Thar'vahl, her voice steady. I need to access the obelisk's core. It's the only way to stop the decay. Vinkar's claws flexed. Do it. The core, 34 hours to collapse. The obelisk's core was a labyrinth of shifting walls and pulsating energy conduits. Lira navigated it with a mix of scavenged tech and sheer determination, her crystal spear serving as both tool and weapon. The Thar'vahl watched from a safe distance, their unease growing with every step she took. She is fearless, Zul'Thra observed. She is reckless, Vinkar countered, and it will be her undoing. When Lira reached the core, a massive pulsating sphere of energy, the air around it crackled with power, and the ground trembled violently. All right, she muttered, pulling out her calculator. Let's do this. She input a series of equations, her fingers flying over the cracked buttons. The core responded, its energy shifting and coalescing into a new form. The holographic riddle reappeared, its final line glowing brightly, and ascend the stair of ash. Lira took a deep breath. Here goes nothing. She pressed the final button. The obelisk erupted in a blinding flash of light. The ground shook violently, and the sky split open, revealing a swirling vortex of energy. Lira shielded her eyes, her heart pounding. What the hell did I just do? The Thar'vahl stared in awe and terror as the vortex expanded, consuming the wasteland. You have doomed us all, Vinkar roared, his voice filled with rage. She turned to him, her eyes blazing and her face in a feral scowl. No, I just saved your sorry asses. The vortex stabilized, its energy coalescing into a massive, shimmering bridge, a stairway of ash, leading to a new dimension. Years later, the story of Lira and the obelisk became legend. The Thar'vahl kept their word, leaving the human settlements in peace. But the galaxy had changed. Humans were no longer seen as vermin. They were survivors, problem solvers, and occasionally heroes. Lira herself disappeared into the wasteland, her fate unknown. But her legacy lived on, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always hope. And so, the galaxy moved forward, forever changed by the child of fractured stars.